Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar comic review. This one's going to be for the 2015 Free Comic Book Day Avatar comic, which is called Sisters. I'll just say it straight away, I wasn't actually able to get the comic, so I had to wait for scans like basically everyone else. I'll just say right now. Link to the scans / my written review of the book are in the description. There's a link there to avatarthelastairbender.online.com. The scans come from Troy, Trojan People, co-host of the Avatar Online podcast with myself. So definitely thanks to him for supplying those scans, so everyone else who couldn't attend could actually read the book. Myself, I didn't attend Free Comic Book Day because basically when I went to sleep last night at like midnight, it was lashing rain. I was hoping that when I woke up it wouldn't still be lashing rain, but it was. It was lashing rain all night and basically all day. It kind of just stopped about an hour ago, and just looking outside it looks like it's basically about to rain again. So pretty bad rain here in Ireland, and I just really wasn't in the mood of going out to wait outside in a line for like an hour or two. Just to basically get the one comic that I wanted. So I just said to myself, I'm just going to wait for scans, and we have them. So there's that. So yeah, the book itself, let's get into actually reviewing this one. The main things to compare it to, obviously, are the previous two kind of free comics that told a story of their own. That being last year's free comic, Shells, about Sokka and Suki, and then the year before that we had the one about May, Rebound. So those two were pretty good. This one I think is kind of equally as good. In terms of a ranking system, I'd say Rebound is probably my favourite. Shells is probably my number 3, and this would be number 2. So it's in between those two. The main thing, I suppose, about my placement of Sisters is just that, for me, Rebound was good character development for May, and it also is setting up stuff going into Smoke and Shadows. Shells is bottom because while it was cool to see Sokka and Suki again together in a story, there was no character development for either character really, and it didn't really tie into anything else. It was cool to learn the history of the Kyoshi warriors. That was a pretty cool little backstory we got there. But for the most part it was just, okay, nice story. This one I feel is somewhere in between, in that it's really good character development for Ty Lee, who even more so than May hasn't had the most amount of attention in the entire Avatar universe so far. And while it's not directly setting up where Ty Lee's going to be in Smoke and Shadows, it just confirms a few more little things and really helps to develop a character who's needed development. So it's just a case of Ty Lee needed this focus, and there's some really nice development for her, and you get to meet her sisters in this book, which is very important. So yeah. More specifically on what actually happens in the book, it's Toph and Ty Lee on the cover, but Toph's involvement in this book is very minor. In my opinion, the only reason why Toph is in this story is because she's Jean Yang, the writer's favorite character to write, and that's really the only reason she's in here. I think a lot of people were expecting, oh cool, we're finally going to get this really cool relationship between Toph and Ty Lee, see what their friendship is like, because they've barely interacted in the series. And even after a couple of scenes of interacting in this book, I still don't have a good idea about what their friendship relationship is actually like, because it's not like this book is about Toph helping Ty Lee through her issues of kind of dealing with part of feeling like she's just a part of a matched set, and dealing with her quest for individuality, being unique and stuff like that. Toph is just kind of there. She just happens to be the first one to come up and talk to Ty Lee when she's upset after kind of feeling off with the Kyoshi warriors. She then drags her to the circus, which happens to be the circus that Ty Lee was once a part of. And there's nothing implying that Toph knew that this was the case and that would help Ty Lee. It's just, it happened to happen. And then kind of Toph is just watching the circus being herself. She's completely in character, Toph, but she's not really doing much. She's just there for the sake of having some form of a partner character that we know of with Ty Lee. Ty Lee is far and away the star of this book. Toph is barely really a focus at all. But as I said, the key focus of this is Ty Lee. Basically, you know what Ty Lee talks like. She says her aura is off now that she's with the Kyoshi Warriors. This has been the case from the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender. We've seen her as part of the Kyoshi Warriors in the comics as well. And obviously this is hinting that she may want to quit. Even throughout this book, she basically comes to a conclusion, like midway through, that I'm just going to go to Suki and say that I'm quitting. And the main reason for this is that basically she's beginning to feel the same way with the Kyoshi Warriors that she felt like she was when she was with her sisters. That she was just part of a matched set, that there was nothing unique about her within the group, which was her big kind of moment in the beach when she finally revealed this kind of issue with herself when they were all talking about their personal issues. She brought up the fact that, you know, how tough it was for her to grow up with 6 identical sisters and not feeling like she really had a name among that group of 6. And there's some really interesting stuff that comes up in this book in relation to this. So she meets her sisters who have basically replaced her in the circus as basically that acrobatics act. The 6 of them have replaced Ty Lee as the master acrobat in the circus. And Ty Lee gets a little bit annoyed with them because they made this kind of pact/deal when they were younger, that they would all have their own thing, that they would all have this own thing that they would do that's unique to them, that none of the other sisters would even kind of try to do, because that would kind of take away from some of their individuality. It's a really interesting concept that, like, okay, Ty Lee was the acrobat, that was her thing. One of them was like origami and stuff like that. You know, you get the idea that one of them, they just have all these individual hobbies, and that was the thing that they kind of used to define themselves. That's why you get the idea Ty Lee left to join the circus, because she eventually grew kind of upset that even with her thing, she still didn't feel that unique. And she feels like her sisters have kind of stole this from her. They kind of accuse her of stealing this thing that they were all good at. So you get the idea that they were all basically natural acrobats. Ty Lee just happened to, I suppose, be the best of them, and that became her thing. And, you know, you don't get a massive amount of character on the other 6 sisters. We get to learn their names, which is nice. And like, you know, for one of the sisters is kind of a bit mean, while the other 5 are very, very, very similar to Ty Lee. You know, maybe they're a little bit more argumentative than Ty Lee is, but for the most part, they're very similar to her. I suppose going back to Toph for a little bit, the one notable thing I think for Toph in the book, in terms of does she actually help Ty Lee at all, is just that after the sisters have this kind of argument, Toph is just there in the background watching them argue, and then she comes out with Ty Lee and basically says, that was pretty interesting, but you're my favourite of all your sisters. And I suppose the idea of this is that Toph, having known Ty Lee for a little bit longer, that makes a decision that after meeting all of them, that Ty Lee is her favourite, that she relates to Ty Lee more because of who she individually is. There was something unique about Ty Lee compared to her other sisters that made her say this. Again, I think I'm super stretching even trying to make that connection, but it's something that is there within the story. After this, you know, Ty Lee's just super annoyed with her sisters, and then they see some kind of thugs out the back of the kind of circus, basically about to like cause some trouble for the circus in the kind of behind the scenes area. So Toph and Ty Lee basically go over to fight them, to stop them. Toph says she's going to take the firebender, while Ty Lee takes this big giant guy. She tries to kick him, doesn't work, and she's about to be basically beaten up by this big guy when all of her sisters, it's kind of like implied that maybe like they have an accident with the acrobatics, or they know and specifically come in to help Ty Lee. Either way, they kind of crash through the curtain and end up knocking down the guy. And basically the idea is that the 7 sisters together, working together, took down this big guy and saved the circus from being basically burnt down by this firebender and his friend. And this is where a little bit of my issue with the book comes in. Like, I think that for an 8-page story, it covers a lot. It deals with a fairly complicated issue, this issue of individuality and feeling like part of a match set for Ty Lee. But it needs maybe one or two more pages to fully resolve everything it tries to set up and do, because the resolution comes very quickly. That basically they're all on the ground after having just knocked out this guy. Then the seven of them just have this group hug, and it's just like, okay, it's great, we're a happy family again. And then Ty Lee goes to Suki and says that no, I'm not quitting. From being around my sisters again, I learned that sometimes it's okay to be part of a match set, because sometimes you're in situations where you need more than one person to basically solve that situation. You can't just do it alone, which I feel is a little bit kind of side skirting the issue, in that they're kind of almost trying to make it out that Ty Lee was trying to do everything on her own, that she was like kind of a loner, and removed herself from her sisters because she didn't want to work with them. Whereas it was more of just a question of she wanted to feel unique around them. And then she's kind of come to terms with being this way around her sisters because they're all acrobats and they all helped each other to take down this guy. It was a little bit kind of like weird how the situation came to kind of resolve itself. I like what happens next in terms of like the final panel of the page, when she says to Suki that, okay, I'm not going to go off with my sisters because I've learned to kind of accept where I am now with the Kyoshi Warriors, that her and the girls that are part of the Kyoshi Warriors, they're Ty Lee's sisters now. And she feels she can feel comfortable around them, and she kind of gets past her issue of feeling, I suppose, not like an individual around them, by realizing that, even though they look the same, with the Kyoshi Warriors, she can always solve that issue just by taking off the makeup. That she's still herself and stuff like that. And I think maybe they could have played into the idea of that Ty Lee, just on her own, changed the Kyoshi Warriors a little bit, in that she taught them all a little bit of chi blocking. That's a really important thing, that she's introduced this kind of whole new technique to this group of warriors, and they're better for having her on their team. And she also seemed to add this extra level of kind of fun to the group. All of the other ones seem quite serious, like even Suki, and Ty Lee's just this kind of really kind of just kind of peppy girl who adds this kind of extra dynamic to the group. They maybe could have played on that a little bit more in terms of, again, another thing to make her unique among the group. But I think overall the story has it come together, that meeting her sisters basically kind of made her realize that her issues weren't as big as she kind of thought they were, and that they're not kids anymore. At this point, they're teens getting into being adults. It's not really too much of a case of like when we were younger anymore. The idea here is that they're all kind of they're not with their kind of parents anymore, so they kind of more don't need their parents to define my one thing or stuff like that. The idea is just that Ty Lee has finally learned to kind of accept who she is. That I suppose her big development is ultimately that it's no longer a problem for her to be part of a group of people who all look the same. She doesn't mind being part of a group anymore. She doesn't feel the need to always have to have something unique and kind of stick out a little bit. She can do that at times, but also she can take off the makeup and be normal Ty Lee and be her unique self, but she can also be part of a group, which ultimately is pretty cool development that this comic does reasonably well. It's not perfect, as I said, and definitely in the comments I would really like to know what your guys' thoughts are on the book. I think for 8 pages to deal with what is a really complicated issue of this whole individuality and stuff like that, it did a really good job at attempting to even touch on this, and it's really well done, and really makes me appreciate Ty Lee's character arc all the more. This really added a lot to her as a character that I didn't quite get from Avatar: The Last Airbender. You have that scene in the beach, of course. You have her betrayal of Azula, which is a big moment for her. But in terms of Ty Lee individually and her arc, this really helps to, in a way, complete her arc from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, hopefully she will play some form of a role in Smoke and Shadows, which is the next main series of comics, which is starting in September. And maybe her development from this story will kind of really heavily apply as we go in here. Maybe what she's learned here will help kind of Azula and May to kind of, May and Ty Lee to maybe form that friendship back with Azula and kind of deal with some form of the aftermath with them. But overall, it's a solid story. It is a free comic again. It's not trying to do anything crazy, but I thought they did some pretty nice stuff with that, given that it's 8 pages. Given that it's not really meant to be that much. And so, I'm very happy with it overall. Final thing to say is just that we'll be doing a much bigger in-depth review of this book, basically going through it page by page, tomorrow on the Avatar Online podcast. Episode 107, it's going to be myself, Troy, Greg, Kelly. That's who's planned to be on. We'll see who actually turns up. But a selection of those hosts, hopefully all of them, will be on the podcast tomorrow to actually discuss this book in full. We'll give it a much bigger review than I gave it myself here. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the book. Again, link to read this comic, Sisters, is in the description. Thanks for watching, and bye.